it's hard not to compare yourself, right? And say
Mhm.
like, well, that was supposed to be me, right? I was supposed to be able to do that. I did everything the same way and it turned out different for me. Why? Right? Like,
Mhm.
is it what did I? Is people just don't like me personally? Like, right? Like, it's hard
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
to look at something and, but that's the big trick of all this too. Is like, no, but there's no clear path. There's no one way to anything, right? Um,
Mhm.
I guess if you want to become a banker, maybe that's a little more straightforward of a path. But anything here, again, the wishy-washiness of art. There is not like a ladder to climb. That it's, I put this one foot here and
Mhm.
I'm height as that guy because we are walking up the pace. Like everybody's going to land somewhere different based on whatever, right? Like that's the
Mhm.
challenge. But whatever. Why? Why is it whatever? Why isn't it? I did this right, so I deserve. You know, I did X, so I deserve Y. It doesn't always
Yeah,
go that
no,
way.
it doesn't
Mhm.
work.
Mhm.
Yeah, I find that with I it happens less and less with the even in my corporate career. I have that question come up a lot of like, how did you get where you are? And I tell them did A, B, and C, and that's why I'm here. But with this side of things, I get similar questions, right? Like I've done panels about Kickstarter, and I got a whole bunch of people always ask me questions on the newsletter and stuff, and they're saying like, how did you get to this? And it's like, well, I took a really strange path, and then like you can't just do what I did. It like that path is closed now. You have to kind of cut your own
Mhm.
woods and figure out a new way. Because the way I did it, you know, probably won't work for you. Barely works for me. Like I don't recommend you just cut and paste and do it the same way because you might find a better way through, right? Um,
Yeah, that's right.
but when you're younger, you almost want to know. It's like, well, I go to school, I get my diploma, and then I get the job, right? And it's well, we were promised that
You
too.
want that formula.
Yeah,
You want that formula. It's true. You're told that formula, and that's what you expect. And so when you try the formula and the machine still doesn't work, you're like, what gives?
exactly,
What gives?
right. And that's part of the learning experience too. Is that that's part of the sales pitch to get you, to get you to school, to get you to whatever. It's to say, we know the formula. Come here, spend your tuition money here. We'll and we'll unveil the formula to you. And then if you find out that the formula it fails, it's you know, you got to learn to sell it
That
yourself.
was a that was a big thing for me when I had just graduated, going on to film sets and seeing, I mentioned school earlier and talking about how I went on to film sets with people who had no background in film whatsoever. And when I would go into these film sets, I would, at first it was like, oh, I have a master's degree in film. And they would all just like get quiet and look at me and be like, okay. They were like, okay. And then gradually it turned to them just like busting out laughing. Like, who does that? You got a master's in film? And I was like, yeah, because I was told that the more educated you are, the higher you get paid, right? And that's how the film industry works. And they're like, no.
Yep.
And realizing that that was a formula that you were fed. And interestingly enough, so with the K-pop work, they told me they hired me because of everyone who had approached them. I had a master's, which I thought was funny because I was like, but that doesn't mean that my film is good though. Like,
Mhm.
interesting. But in other vocations, the masters mean something. But in film, like someone asked me, like, would you get a doctorate? And I said, if I got my doctorate, it'd be because I'm old and I'm bored and I want to get educated in something completely different. And they were just like, you wouldn't get a doctorate in film. I said, no, no one does that. I promise you, no one does that. And they can't, some people can't wrap their head around it. But yeah, it's a formula that people tend to assume just works.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, well, I guess if you wanted to become a film professor, that would be your doctorate, right? That's the only path I could see that working. But if you want to be a grip, you probably don't need it, right?
Right.
You'd be the most educated grip in the world.
Oh, man. But that just, I mean, just what we were talking about a while ago, understanding your worth and your value. That's a whole process in your creative field that no one I don't think when I say that I was taught certain things, I mean, it's kind of like I'm realizing I just went out inherently and probably just naively believing certain things. Hence why I like buck my head against so many different walls when I was coming up. But like that is a process no one talks about as a creative is having to learn how to value yourself. And then don't not to even mention the process for me, I remember sometimes working as a photographer, freelance photographer for different events and saying, how much should I be charging? I remember I have a story of a documentary that I did fresh out of college. This fashion designer was followed around by a videographer for a year. And the videographer came to me and like a frantic and he said, please help me. I have a year's worth of footage and I have no idea what to do with it because it's all so random. Can you turn this into a story for me? And I said, yeah, sure. I spent weeks sifting through the footage, weeks, probably the whole month sifting through the footage, organizing it, picking out, like categorizing it, and then saying, okay. And I turned it into like a story of their creative process, their upbringing, different events they've been through. And when the videographer saw it, they loved it. And they showed it to the fashion designer. The fashion designer hated it. And
Huh.
now this was a year's worth of footage. And the man when I asked them, I remember asking the videographer, how much should I charge for this? Because I didn't know and I didn't think to look it up. And when I looked it up, I think most people couldn't tell you. They were like, oh, charge per cut. And I was like, if I charge per cut, this would be $50 million. I mean, so I was like, that's not. So I was like, how much should I charge? And the guy wouldn't tell me. So I charged $200 for
Uh,
probably like a 20-minute film. And I did all of that work. And the fashion designer hated it, didn't even want to pay me. And the videographer is the one who ended up covering my pay. And then he came to me and he said, you know why he didn't want to pay you, right? I said, no, I don't understand. I thought he just didn't like the film. He said, oh, his excuse was that your website looked too amateurish. So he didn't think you need to be paid too much. And I was like,
wow.
huh. And just the number of times that I hit that wall of like, I didn't know my worth or my value or what to charge or my sense of, um, my sense of worth, what, like you said, was like a feedback loop of what other people were telling me. And I had to learn that process. No one talks about that process as a creative. I think not enough people talk about it really.
Yeah, 100%. And it's because it's like a very vulnerable thing to talk about, right? And almost like if you talk about it too much, the people are gonna start diminishing your value, right? Or they say, I
Mhm.
feel like I find I tend to overshare, right? So like every time I do a comics project on Kickstarter, I do my postmortem and I share everything. I share it down to the dollar where I overspent, how much I lost in a lot of cases, right? Like
Mhm.
I share all of it. And it's always shocking to everyone. It's like, well, you're still here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't steer you
Mhm.
away. Like, I know people are always concerned about, like, well, if I tell people I failed, they're going to think I'm a failure and they'll stop supporting me. I've seen the opposite. I find that the more transparent you are, the more you say, look, I aimed for this. I undershot it, but this is how I'm going to adjust. This is how I'm going to do better. People really appreciate that because they're getting a view that you don't normally get or that because people are like too vulnerable or whatever to share and say, you know, here's specifically how I failed. Here's here's where I went wrong. Here's what went well. Here's whatever. And then we just kind of, you're an open book and say, look, you can copy this.
Mhm.
Why? Like because we're still going to do it differently anyway at the end of the day. Um, but I found that seems to be a huge value to people for that reason because the conversation's never had, right? Like it's usually, you just see their uh, again, talking about like crowdfunding and stuff, see how much they made. You're like, wow, they made 5 figures, they made 6 figures, they made whatever. You're like, wow, they're doing so well. And
Mhm.
they realize, well, no, they doubled the spend on that, right? Or I mean, a lot of it was advertised.
Mhm.
So you could kiss half of that goodbye. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And then that stops people from ever getting started because they think, well, I'll never hit those heights.
Mhm.
You're like, you guys are almost in the same place. They're just, putting more into it or whatever. Right. Um, So, yeah, so that's what led me to be a lot more open with all that stuff because I find if
Mhm. Hopes, yeah.
you don't share, you don't learn, right?
Mhm. And you have to question too, and I would be curious to hear you guys' answer to this, but like, how do you define failure? Like for me, along this journey, I had to redefine failure coming from a perfectionist Jamaican household where I was not allowed to make anything except A's. Like it was like a joke amongst the cousins that we were told as kids, if you don't make A's, don't come home. Like, like coming from that, how do you define failure? Or how did you have to redefine failure? For me, I had to look at failure as giving up. Not when you make a mistake. It's not when you slip up. Not when you underperform. Not in any of those circumstances. Failure is in the mindset, and failure is when you stop learning, stop growing, stop altogether, and completely give
I
up.
agree.
And then you have to question, well, giving up to what extent? Are you taking a break and pivoting, and then you're going to come back? Because that's not giving up, right? Like I had to reframe failure in order to not be so upset with my process.
So yeah, no, I think you nailed it. It's like, yeah, giving up is the failure. It's easier said than done in some cases. Like I know making comics,
Mhm.
especially if you're not an artist, it could get expensive very quickly. But yeah, like for me, it's also being realistic about what you're stepping into. So when I got started, I knew, look, I'm not gonna walk in and start making a profit, right? Like I'd love to.
Mhm.
Not want to like, hey, every time I make a profit, is wonderful. But it's not the norm to start, especially, right? Like while you're getting your name out there and doing all that business, you're spending. Like that's all you're investing in yourself. Your business is your next step in your education, right? So
Mhm.
it's that. Like you could easily and that's the thing, you can't expect instant gratification either. So you put out one product, one comic, one movie, one whatever, and it doesn't pay itself off. Well, yeah, because who are you? Right? Like you've made a calling card of what you made. That's going to, you know what I mean? That's an expense on you. You should understand that while getting into it. And as you build and as more people get to know you, the tide starts to turn. And I find that even when I do these big nerdy like deep dives into all the numbers, like I can see the clear trajectory. Like, okay, like each one's doing a little bit better than the last. There's a unicorn in there that did really well here and there, right? But for the most part, it's a slow progression. You're seeing the step up, and it's like, well, yeah. So failure would be I see that step up and I go, well, it's too far. I don't want to make that leap to where I consider myself a pure success, so I'm just going to stop here, right? Um, yeah, you just have to you keep moving forward. And it doesn't mean you keep doing it the same way either, right? Like if you can't
Mhm.
if you can't afford to keep taking losses on projects or you know what I mean? There's other routes, there's other avenues to still do this and still find success. Like I know folks that almost exclusively do anthologies. Like they'll submit to anthologies and get their work published that way. Cool. No skin off their back, right? Like uh, somebody else is paying for it to put it together. So that's a way to do it too. But it's that drive to be like, I'm going to keep creating until I'm getting that value. Like Roberto said, that I'm starting to see the fruits of my labor kind of reflected back at me. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's perpetual motion. You got to just keep moving forward. It's much easier said
Mhm.
than done though. That's character, right? Character, that's how you build it.
Yeah, this is grit, and that's the grit part. And asking yourself certain questions. Like I, over the years, have had to learn to say, okay, if this is out of reach for me, what's the step I can take today that will make that one step closer for me? Asking the right questions to get to where you want. So like, um, I've learned, and I had to, like I said, I had to work on my mindset a lot throughout this creative process to because mindset is everything. Came to realize that mindset is everything. And a common question I hear a lot of successful people ask themselves is, okay, and first off, someone said to me a couple things that I hold closely to my heart. In order to go where you've never gone before, you must do what you've never done before. The other one is a no is not a no unless you have a why. The no is not really a no. You just have the wrong person. And if something seems like it's out of reach, what can you do today that can make it one step closer? How can you make it possible instead of saying that it is impossible? And that's another, I think, mindset I've had to adopt. A number of mindsets I've had to adopt as a creative to be able to move forward. That is something I've had to do.
I like that. Yeah. It's all mindset, like you felt. Like you have to know how to build on what you're doing, right?
Mm.
Like it's never I think we're kind of circling the same concept. Like it's just there is no straight path. There's no formula. There's like kind of build that for yourself. Like how do you get there? How do you find your way? That's on you to sort out. So yeah, yeah. It's been a very philosophical conversation.
Yes.
the most we've had. Like I said, we usually talk.
I like it.
Much, and we don't have to talk. This has been good. This has been good. Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting path for sure. So as he's finishing this, we can jump to the dialogue. When Roberto gets a chance, we'll zoom out and we'll see if there's anything worth saying or to be said here. You're running the show, so I will let you, if something comes to you, let me know what should be said, how it should be said. We can type it out in the chat, and then Roberto will do a nice copy paste and make their nice bubbles and balloons.
I feel like the dialogue for the guy should be something like, I don't know, this woman looks like a Diana. I could be wrong. If you feel she's an Emily, I don't mind. But kind of like the guy is calling out her name, like, hey, Diana, and she's not answering him, and he's like, hey, don't you see me? Hello. And she makes a comment that is like speaks very much to the fact that she doesn't see him. So she says something like, we said, is it that he's calling her? Yeah, he's calling her. She's like, oh, so and so is calling me. I mean, call him Mark or something. And he's like, wait a second, what? And she says, hello, Mark, I'm coming out now or something. And just as she's coming out, this accident happens and she says his name out loud. And that maybe is the moment that the audience connects that Mark here on the bicycle is also the Mark who was talking to Diana, who couldn't see him. And that helps them come full circle to realize why she couldn't see him.
I like that. Yeah. So it's kind of helping. It's adding. It's adding to the. Okay, so let's start with that first panel. So yeah, I think like you said, so if we're going with Diana,
let's do
is that her name? Cool. So shall I type
Yes, please. Yeah. Hey,
here? It me is weird.
hey, Diana, how's it going? Kind of like he calls out to her, something like that.
Yeah. How's it going? Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Okay. Sorry, I'm late. Done. All right. That's our panel 1. Roberto will keep refining this until fully demolished. Oh, so I have to catch me first. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to get a glance at other pen.
Yeah, and the second one, I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah. Okay. So like
over her shoulder.
Diana, everything okay? So yeah, something like that.
Or, yeah. But before we use that, so the only thing I'm thinking, so it looks like the first panel is like the intro. Second panel is where he's like, hey, like, what's going on?
The concern.
It looks like the third one, though, is where like the concern sets in. So maybe that's where he's like, can you hear me? Hello? Right? That's where she's getting mad. Like, so, okay. So maybe we split it up. Maybe we do the, hey, how's it going in the first panel? We do, sorry, I'm late. We have a second panel, right? And that's where he's getting close. He's like, oh, like, you're not talking to me because you're mad because I'm late. Right? We're not realizing that it's because, you're not being heard at all. And then the third one is the, hello, like, can you hear me? Like, what's going on? Don't ignore me, whatever. However we want to write. And then she says something and lets us know that she's upset because we hadn't shown up yet. cue noise standing right there.
No,
Let me know. if
that's
I'm on the right track.
perfect.
I don't
That's
know
perfect,
if
actually.
I don't want to. Roberto refining again. All right. So I'm gonna Roberto, I'm gonna do the balloon and separate the chat strings here. So okay. Hi Dan. Hey Joanna. How's it going? Sorry. Late. Try to like make a joke. Traffic, anything like that. I don't. We'll stick with sorry I'm late. If we need to expand. And then we go with hey, everything okay?
Can we get him to say, like Diana? Question mark. You're not mad, are you?
Oh, okay. I like that. Yeah. Not mad. Are you? All right. And then what does she say? Like
She's
she's
like,
shaking fist looking at her
where
phone.
is he? He's late. I haven't seen it. Like something along the lines that says that refers to he, and we connect that he is the picture, is the man. You see what I'm saying? So, like, where is he? He's late.
But yeah, maybe it's a like or something that like, she's not concerned because she's a jerk. She's concerned because she's concerned.
Sorry, but maybe
Right?
it should be vague enough to not know if it's not speaking to him or speaking maybe instead of where are you instead of where is he?
Where are you? Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So so you don't know yet that he's not there.
Okay.
Vague.
Yeah.
So
Impact.
the reveal
Yes. Yes.
at the
Yes.
end has more power, maybe. But yes.
Okay. So
Let's
how do
call
we
him
say
Mark.
that? Does he need a name? Is that right? Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are you, Mark?
Like, come on, Mark. Where are you? No. That sounds a little annoyed. Yeah. Let's stick with where are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we don't want her to come off too. We don't want to think that he threw himself in front of you, like spare. It was like hard to spare himself here. He wants to be
And
there.
then the
Okay, so that's our third panel. The fourth one, does the fourth one need dialogue where she's looking at the phone?